Welcome back to the Deep 404. We've got two big things to talk about today. One of them is the large missile strike that Russia carried out yesterday. Well over 100 missiles reportedly fired into Ukraine. And the other one is what everyone's talking about today. The reports that American President Joe Biden has approved the use of long-range ATACMS missiles to be fired by the Ukrainians from within Ukraine into Russia. We might just start there. There are a lot of Western papers, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, all of these sort of things, reporting that Biden has approved the use of ATACMS missiles being used against Russia directly inside of being fired from Ukraine into Russia. These ATACMS missiles are in their longest range version capable of 190 miles, which is a sizable range. What isn't clear from the reporting in the West so far is exactly what range and type of ATACMS is going to be used. Now, this may change by the time this video comes up and you're seeing this. This may be clear. However, a Ukrainian channel on Telegram that I often read, they are suggesting that what has been approved is ATACMS, but it is a shorter range version, a 50-mile range version, and they are suggesting that the longer range, 190-mile range ATACMS, have not yet been approved for use. So we'll see. Also, I don't know if the actual final signature by Biden has occurred yet to make this possible for the Ukrainians to fire them. Now, there are some questions on the screen here. For those of you who are just listening, on the screen here are some pictures of the ATACMS missile. Now, that for these to be launched from the ground, there need to be these ATACMS launches in Ukraine, which no doubt there are. That will have some impact and limit upon how successful using these weapons are in the first place. If there were a whole bunch of ATACMS launches, if there were a whole heap of aircraft in Ukraine which could launch long-range American missiles, then there might be an actual threat to Russia, and that threat may be something that could change the direction of the conflict in Ukraine. As it stands, there isn't. There aren't enough ATACMS launches. The Ukrainian Air Force is non-existent. Ukraine doesn't have an ability to launch enough of these to actually cause a problem for Russia. Unless they were to do something insane and launch missiles at, say, the Kursk nuclear power plant and try to cause some sort of nuclear-related issue. But setting that aside, at this stage, this won't have an impact on the conflict. What it will do is it will be seen as a reckless move by the Russians. It will quite possibly lead to escalation, and it appears to be a sort of a vindictive and cynical attempt by the current president, Joe Biden, to force incoming President Trump's hand in the way that he deals with Ukraine, the position that America has with Russia over this conflict. Some are suggesting that by doing this, it's giving Ukraine a better bargaining position when they come to negotiate with Russia. They could say, we will stop firing long-range missiles if you give us X, Y, and Z. However, there's an announcement from the Russian spokesman, Maria Zakharova, earlier today, where she has simply said that President Putin has already given his opinion on the use of long-range missiles in Russia, and that opinion is that the nations that supply those long-range missiles will be considered active combatants in this conflict, and that they can expect significant retaliation for that. So you might expect that if this does happen, and if long-range missiles are fired from Ukraine, American ATACMS fired from Ukraine into Russia, that Russia will retaliate against known American assets. Now, they won't be firing missiles into America, but what they might do is fire missiles into American assets in other areas of the world, so American bases, American troops in the Middle East, perhaps. The Russians may reach out there. They may already know where there are American and NATO assets within Ukraine in sort of command and control roles, which they have not struck, and we might see an uptick in strikes into Ukraine targeting those sort of US assets, those human assets, providing guidance to the Ukrainians. So this is, as I say, it appears to me a vindictive move. This seems to be a way to make things tougher for President Trump as Joe Biden is leaving office. Nobody wants this conflict to escalate. This isn't going to stop things from escalating. This is likely to cause some level of escalation, particularly if the Ukrainians do use these missiles and they do strike a significant target within Russia. That could lead to a very heavy retaliation from the Russians against the Ukrainians. The reasoning given here by Biden, or at least reportedly, is that this has been approved as a deterrent against the North Koreans for sending their 10,000 North Korean soldiers into the Kursk region. It might just be me, but I haven't seen any evidence of these North Korean soldiers yet. Now, are there some North Korean soldiers in Russia? I would suggest there probably are. The Koreans and North Koreans and the Russians signed an agreement a few months ago, an agreement which would tie them to supporting one another militarily. That has just been signed into law in North Korea this week. So this seems to be the trigger or the concern for the West and the US. And so do I think there are some North Korean soldiers in Russia? Yeah, I imagine there are, in an observer and learning capability. I imagine they've got some guys in there learning how the Russians are using drones, getting a taste for what modern warfare looks like in this conflict. Have they got 10,000 North Korean soldiers in there, fighting on the front line? I would say it's highly unlikely, for a couple of really good reasons that people far more experienced than I have called out. Daniel Davis, I saw the other day, saying quite simply, who wants 10,000 soldiers in the middle of your hot zone who can't speak the language? So unless all of these North Koreans are fluent in Russian, or there are a whole bunch of Russian fighters who are fluent in North Korean, then I think it's very unlikely that they're going to be frontline combatants trying to fight and take over areas that the Russians are successfully defending and advancing in at this stage anyhow. Just the general logic test would show you that there's no need for the Russians to bring in 10,000 North Korean troops. The Russians have got plenty of troops. They've got plenty of people volunteering. They have had for the last couple of years. There's no supply issue on that side. But as I say, if we were to find evidence that, yes, there are some there, I'm not surprised there are some there. But I imagine, as I say, they're in an observer role more than anything else. Anyhow, what we might see is the other point here is that if the Ukrainians do use these long-range missiles on targets within Russia, that there will be a repeat of last night's missile attack. There are reports of 140 or more missiles being fired. As expected, they appear to primarily have targeted Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Today, I have read some reports that 7 out of the 9 operational Ukrainian nuclear power plants have been brought offline because of the strike. Not that they have been struck, but because feeder circuits and exit circuits out of those plants have perhaps been destroyed. Substations around near the not the exact perimeter of them, but outside of them in the supply chain have been destroyed, and so now there's nowhere for them to send their power to. I'm imagining is what has happened. So this we spoke about yesterday as an expected approach for the Russians over the coming months to force the Ukrainians into a very harsh winter. If it is true, the reports that 7 out of the 9 remaining active nuclear power plants have gone offline today, then the winter is going to get very tough. If you saw the episode yesterday, there was some pictures I was showing of how the snow and ice is starting to fall, and the ground, it looks like it's on its way to freezing. So the winter is very hard in Ukraine. All right, just a short one today. I will leave that there, but that's the big 2 points for the day in the Ukraine news is that Biden's approved some ranged ATACMS missiles to be fired by the Ukrainians into Russia, and a large strike on the Ukrainian energy infrastructure again last night. See you tomorrow.